My entitled sister tried to sabotage my inheritance and ruined her own life instead. Growing up, my sister Lily, 29F, and I, 34F, lived in what could only be described as a world of privilege. Our parents had built a wildly successful family business, an empire, really, that gave us every advantage you could imagine. Private schools, lavish vacations, expensive hobbies, you name it. While I knew from a young age that our family's wealth came from hard work and sacrifice, Lily always seemed to assume it was just there. She treated the family fortune like it was her birthright, something she was destined to control because, well, why wouldn't she? Lily was a golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. It didn't matter that she coasted through life, never really putting in the effort because she had that magnetic charm about her. She had the ability to manipulate situations to her favor and make you feel guilty for not giving her exactly what she wanted. Growing up, I was constantly reminded of how different we were. I was the responsible one, the one who took school seriously, helped out in the family business from an early age, and actually listened to my parents when they talked about the importance of contributing to something larger than myself. But Lily? She was a master at playing the victim whenever things didn't go her way. If she failed a class, it was the teacher's fault. If she blew through her allowance in record time, it was because life is expensive. And of course, my parents would always find a way to bail her out. She's just young, they'd say. She'll learn. Except she never did. I remember one particularly telling incident when I was about 22 and Lily was 17. Our parents had bought her a brand new car for her birthday, a top-of-the-line SUV. It was something most people could only dream of. But Lily? She threw a fit because it wasn't the exact color she wanted. She actually cried, as if she'd been handed a piece of junk. I couldn't believe my ears. I remember watching our parents try to soothe her, promising to trade in the car for the one she wanted, and thinking, how is this even real? Over time, that pattern only got worse. Lily grew up with the expectation that the world would bend to her whims, and she carried that entitlement into adulthood. Meanwhile, I worked my way through school, got my degree in business management, and eventually started working full-time for the family company. It was important to me that I earned my place, that I wasn't just another spoiled rich kid who got handed everything on a silver platter. I loved the business and the sense of purpose it gave me. But for Lily, work was an inconvenience. She floated in and out of meaningless jobs, half-heartedly attending college, but never sticking with anything long enough to graduate. Instead, she relied on our parents to fund her lifestyle. They never put much pressure on her to get her act together, always assuming she'd figure it out eventually. I tried not to judge, but it was hard not to resent the fact that while I was grinding away, building a future, Lily was living off the family wealth and contributing nothing in return. As we got older, it became clear that my parents were starting to think more seriously about the future of the business, and more importantly, the family inheritance. Our father, in particular, had always been very private about financial matters, but in the past few years, he'd started dropping hints about what would happen when the time comes. I wasn't naive. I knew that someday, the family wealth would be divided between Lily and me. But I always assumed that my parents, especially my dad, would handle it fairly, that they would base their decisions on who had contributed more to the business, who had proven themselves capable of managing the responsibility. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to believe that her mere existence guaranteed her the lion's share of everything. This all came to a head about a year ago when my dad had a serious health scare. He had a heart attack, totally out of the blue, and while he recovered, it became clear that our family needed to start planning for the future more seriously. My mom, understandably, was terrified of losing him, and she pushed for us to have the talk, the one about wills, inheritance, and the future of the business. At first, I wasn't too worried. I had worked my ass off in the company, and I had a solid relationship with my parents. I assumed they'd be fair in whatever decisions they made. But when we all sat down to discuss it, I saw a side of Lily I hadn't fully appreciated before. She wasn't just entitled, she was ruthless. When Dad had his heart attack, it felt like the earth shifted beneath us. He had always been this indestructible figure in my mind, stoic, tough, the kind of man who rarely showed weakness. Seeing him in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, made me realize just how fragile everything was. It shook me to my core, and I know it rattled my mom too. For weeks after the incident, she was anxious about everything: his health, the future of the business, the family itself. She kept bringing up the idea of solidifying their wills and making sure we had a plan in place in case something like this happened again. Lily, however, seemed largely unfazed. She came to the hospital, of course, and played the role of the concerned daughter, but after Dad was stable, it was like she went back to her usual carefree self. She kept saying things like, "Dad's a fighter, he'll be fine," and then would promptly switch the topic to some new handbag she wanted to buy or a party she was going to that weekend. It was surreal how disconnected she seemed, but I chalked it up to her not wanting to deal with the reality of the situation. Denial was always her coping mechanism. Once Dad was back home and recovering, Mom insisted on holding a family meeting to talk about what comes next. She had been talking to their lawyers, working on updating their wills and trusts, and she wanted to make sure everything was out in the open before any decisions were finalized. I agreed. The idea of planning for the future was necessary, even if it felt morbid. But Lily? She practically rolled her eyes when Mom brought it up. "What's the rush, Mom?" she said, lounging on the couch as if this were all an inconvenience. "Dad's fine now. We don't need to talk about this stuff yet." Mom, to her credit, didn't let Lily's dismissiveness derail the conversation. "This isn't about your father's health right now," she said, her voice tight but controlled. "It's about making sure that when the time comes, whenever that is, we're prepared. There won't be any confusion or misunderstandings." I didn't miss the glance she threw in Lily's direction when she said that last part. So we all gathered around the large dining room table on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Mom had a stack of papers in front of her, and Dad, still looking a bit pale but stubbornly trying to act like his usual self, sat at the head of the table. Lily was glued to her phone for most of the time, only glancing up when she sensed something that directly affected her. Mom started by explaining that they wanted to make sure everything was as straightforward as possible. "Your father and I have always believed in fairness," she said, looking between the two of us. "We want to divide our estate in a way that reflects that." I felt a sense of relief. I knew my parents would do the right thing. But Lily's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean, fairness?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "It means," Dad cut in, "that the inheritance will be based not just on family ties, but on contributions to the business. Whoever has proven themselves more capable of handling the responsibility will take a larger share. The company is our legacy, and we want to make sure it's in good hands." I could see Lily's face immediately darken. "So what you're saying, because Lily jabbed a thumb in my direction, works in the business, she's going to get everything?" "No one's saying that," I said, trying to stay calm. "They're just saying the business should be run by someone who knows what they're doing." "Oh, so you're implying I don't know what I'm doing?" Lily snapped, sitting up straight now, her phone forgotten. I resisted the urge to sigh. "Lily, you've never shown any interest in the business. You don't even know how the company operates. So what? That doesn't mean I don't deserve my share." Mom raised her hands, trying to defuse the growing tension. "Girls, let's not fight about this. Lily, no one's saying you don't deserve anything. You're still going to receive part of the inheritance. But your father, and I feel that the person who has been more involved." "You mean her," Lily interrupted bitterly. Mom ignored the interruption. "The person who has been more involved will have a larger share of the business assets. That doesn't mean you're left out, Lily. It just means that your sister has proven her commitment to the company." I could feel the temperature in the room drop as Lily's face twisted into an ugly expression. She was clearly struggling to hold back her anger, but I knew her well enough to recognize when she was fuming. She leaned forward, glaring at me with eyes full of resentment. "This is bullshit," she hissed. "I'm the youngest. I'm the one who should be taken care of. She's had years to kiss up to you and play the perfect daughter. But what about me? You think I haven't contributed because I didn't want to sit behind a desk all day?" Dad, who had been mostly silent up to this point, cleared his throat. "This isn't about favoritism, Lily. It's about what's best for the future of the company." Lily scoffed. "Right, because clearly she's the golden child now. I've always known that's how it would end up." I tried to keep my mouth shut, but I couldn't let her accusations fly without a response. "Lily, it's not about being the golden child. It's about being responsible. I've worked in the business for years, while you've been off doing, well, whatever it is you do. This isn't personal." She shot me a venomous look. "You always act like you're better than me, don't you? Just because you took the traditional path, got a degree, and worked in the family business doesn't make you some kind of saint. Not everyone wants to live your boring life." "Lily, enough!" Mom snapped, surprising both of us. She rarely raised her voice, but the strain of the past few months had clearly worn her down. "This conversation is over. Your father and I have made our decision, and it's final. You'll both get your shares, but the business will primarily go to your sister. She's earned it." Lily's face went pale, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't going to let this go. I could feel it in my bones. After the meeting ended, Lily barely said a word to me as she left the house in a hurry. I figured she needed time to cool off, and honestly, I was relieved to have a discussion behind us. But looking back, I should have known that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the weeks following the family meeting, the atmosphere around the house was tense, especially when Lily was around. She had become even more distant, sulking whenever the topic of the business or inheritance came up, which was pretty often, given Dad's health. She would avoid me like the plague, barely acknowledging my existence unless she had to. Honestly, I figured it was just her way of processing the fact that our parents weren't going to hand her the family fortune on a silver platter. But then things started getting weird. It began with little inconveniences at work, things I might have written off as mistakes at first. A few files went missing from my office, client emails weren't sent when they should have been, and meeting agendas seemed to be shuffled or misplaced. I figured it was just a case of some disorganization or maybe even stress from everything that had happened with Dad's health scare. After all, I was juggling a lot at the time, helping with Dad's recovery, stepping up in the business, and keeping tabs on Lily's ever-deteriorating attitude. But the problems didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. One morning, I came into the office to find that a critical contract with a long-standing client had somehow been lost in the system. Not only was it missing from our internal records, but the client had never received the copy they were supposed to sign. I remember frantically searching for any trace of the document, going through every folder, every backup. Nothing. It was like it had vanished into thin air. I ended up having to call the client personally, apologize for the delay, and scramble to get the contract back together. It was embarrassing, but luckily the client was understanding, albeit confused. This wasn't the only incident. The next week, I noticed that important financial documents had been tampered with. Numbers that were supposed to match up in our accounting software had been altered, creating discrepancies that threw our monthly projections way off. At first, I thought it was just a mistake made by one of our junior accountants, but when I dug deeper, I found that the edits had been made from my login. It didn't make any sense. I was meticulous about security, always logging out, never sharing my passwords. I started to feel paranoid. Maybe I was losing my edge. Maybe I was spreading myself too thin between managing the business and dealing with Dad's health, and somehow I was messing things up without realizing it. I didn't want to sound any alarms prematurely, so I kept it to myself for a while, hoping it would all blow over. But then something happened that made me realize it wasn't just bad luck or carelessness on my part. Someone was actively trying to undermine me. A few months after our family meeting, I was preparing for a major presentation to a potential new client, a big fish that could secure the company's growth for the next decade. I had spent weeks meticulously putting together the proposal, crunching the numbers, and perfecting every detail. On the morning of the presentation, I arrived at the office to review everything one last time, but when I opened the files on my computer, they were gone. The entire presentation, the financial projections, the pitch, it had all been deleted. Not just misplaced, but completely wiped from the system. I felt my stomach drop. There was no way this was an accident. No way this was some random glitch. Someone had gone in and deleted everything. And I had a pretty good idea who it was. Lily had started coming into the office more frequently over the past few weeks, though she never actually did any work. She would show up late, take a long lunch, and leave early, but she always had an excuse for being there. Something about helping out or getting more involved now that our parents were focusing on their estate planning. I had dismissed her presence as harmless, figuring she was trying to make a show of her involvement for Mom and Dad's sake, but now I was certain she had a different agenda. I confronted her that evening, just as she was leaving the office. "Lily," I called out, catching her in the parking lot before she could drive off. She paused, turning to look at me with that ever-present smirk that had started to grate on me more and more. "Did you touch my files?" Her expression shifted, confusion. Fake confusion, masking her features. "What are you talking about?" "The presentation files," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anger bubbling up inside me. "The ones for the client meeting tomorrow. They're gone." She blinked, her eyes widening in mock surprise. "Wow, that's weird. Maybe you forgot to save them?" "Cut the crap, Lily," I snapped, feeling my patience fray. "You've been hanging around the office for weeks, messing with things you have no business touching. Did you delete them?" For a split second, her mask of innocence faltered, and I saw a flicker of something darker cross her face. But she recovered quickly, crossing her arms and leaning against her car with a sigh. "Why would I do something like that, huh? What would I have to gain from sabotaging you?" "I don't know," I said, taking a step closer. "Maybe because you can't stand the fact that Mom and Dad are giving me control of the business? Maybe because you think if I screw up enough, they'll change their minds?" She laughed, a short, bitter sound that made my skin crawl. "Please, like I care about this stupid company. You've always been the one obsessed with it, not me. Then why are you trying so hard to make me look bad?" She shrugged, her smirk returning. "I don't need to make you look bad, sis. You're doing a pretty good job of that all on your own." That was it. I was done playing games. "If I find out you've been messing with my work again," I warned, my voice low and steady, "I'll make sure Mom and Dad know exactly what you've been up to. This isn't a joke, Lily. You could ruin everything for all of us." Lily's smirk faltered for just a moment, but then she straightened up, brushing past me toward her car. "Good luck with that," she said over her shoulder as she got in. "I'm sure they'll believe every word you say." As I watched her drive off, I felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. She was right about one thing. My parents had always given her the benefit of the doubt. No matter how irresponsible or selfish she acted, they always found a way to justify it, to excuse her behavior. And even though I had worked my entire life to build trust with them, I knew that if I accused her of sabotage without any concrete proof, it would just cause more family drama. So I did the only thing I could. I started gathering evidence. Over the next few weeks, I became hypervigilant at work. I kept a close eye on everything: files, emails, conversations. I installed additional security measures on my office computer, set up hidden backups, and even started documenting every interaction I had with Lily. It was exhausting, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself and the business. And sure enough, it didn't take long before I found what I was looking for. One afternoon, while reviewing the office's network activity logs, something I never used to do, but had recently become routine, I noticed a strange login to my account. It was from a computer that wasn't mine, one of the generic workstations in the office that Lily sometimes used when she deigned to show up. The timestamp on the login matched the exact time when the presentation files had been deleted. There it was, proof that she had accessed my account and wiped the presentation. I printed the log and tucked it into my briefcase, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and vindication. I had her. Finally, I had the proof I needed to show my parents that this wasn't just sibling rivalry. Lily was actively trying to sabotage the business. But even with the evidence in hand, I hesitated. I knew confronting her directly wouldn't work. She'd just deny everything and gaslight me like she always did. And while part of me wanted to march straight to my parents and lay out everything, I knew I had to be careful. This wasn't just about me and Lily anymore. This was about the future of the entire family, the business, and everything my parents had built. I needed a plan, and whatever I did next, it had to be airtight. Armed with the evidence, I was prepared to confront Lily in a way that would make it impossible for her to wriggle out of responsibility. But as much as I wanted to take action immediately, I knew this had to be done delicately. If I rushed in guns blazing, she would just twist the situation, accuse me of being paranoid, and Mom and Dad might fall for her act yet again. I had to be careful, calculated. Over the next few days, I kept quiet, biding my time. I gathered more proof, carefully documenting every incident of sabotage, no matter how small. I started piecing together a timeline of all the strange things that had happened in the office, matching them to the times Lily had been there. It was tedious, frustrating work, but I knew I couldn't go to our parents without a rock-solid case. But then Lily pushed things too far, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. It was about 3 weeks after I found the log of her accessing my account. I was working late one evening, trying to recover from the damage she'd done by deleting that major presentation. I was alone in the office, poring over the numbers and projections, when I noticed something off in the company's bank accounts. At first, I thought I was just tired, but the more I looked, the more I realized that significant sums of money were being funneled out, small amounts just below the threshold that would trigger an audit, but frequent. Too frequent to be a coincidence. It didn't take long for me to trace the missing funds back to a series of personal expenses, luxury items, vacations, even gambling debts. The bank statements didn't have names attached, but I recognized the pattern. The reckless spending, the lavish lifestyle. There was no doubt in my mind that Lily had been siphoning money from the company to fund her personal life. And this wasn't just petty sabotage. This was outright theft. My hands shook as I printed out the statements, trying to keep my emotions in check. She wasn't just trying to make me look bad. She was actively draining the company's resources, jeopardizing everything my parents had worked so hard to build. I felt a sickening mixture of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. But I knew I couldn't let that cloud my judgment. I needed to stay focused. The next day, I called our family's lawyer, Mr. Harwell, under the guise of asking him about some routine business matters. I casually mentioned that I wanted to review the financial safeguards in place for the company, and he was more than happy to oblige. I didn't give him all the details, but I could tell he sensed something was off from my tone. He promised to send me a comprehensive report of the company's financial structure, including who had access to which accounts. With that in hand, I finally felt ready. It was time to confront Lily, and I wasn't going to do it alone. I needed Mom and Dad there, too, so there could be no more lies, no more manipulation. That Friday, I arranged for us all to have dinner together at my parents' house. It wasn't an unusual occurrence. Mom often insisted on weekly family dinners, but I could tell she was surprised when I specifically requested that we all be there at the same time. "What's this about?" she asked when I called to set it up. "I just think we need to have a family discussion," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. It's been a while since we all sat down and talked about everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could tell Mom was reading between the lines. "All right, honey," she said softly. "We'll see you then." When I arrived at the house that evening, the tension was palpable. Mom had made a big dinner, but the mood was far from celebratory. Dad was still recovering from his heart attack, and he looked more tired than usual. I felt a pang of guilt. He didn't need this extra stress. But at the same time, I knew that if I didn't do something now, Lily would destroy everything. Lily showed up fashionably late as usual, sauntering into the dining room with a breezy, self-satisfied smile. She was dressed in a designer outfit I hadn't seen before, probably bought with the money she'd stolen from the company, and she acted like she didn't have a care in the world. It made me sick. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not looking sorry at all, as she took a seat across from me at the table. Traffic was awful. I didn't respond, just clenched my jaw and focused on the food in front of me. Mom tried to break the tension by making small talk, asking about Dad's latest doctor's appointments and updating us on some of the family friends. I could tell she was avoiding the real reason I had called this dinner, trying to keep the peace for as long as possible. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dad cleared his throat. "So," he said, glancing at me and then at Lily. "What's this family discussion about?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "It's about the company," I said slowly, carefully. "In the future. There are some things I've discovered that we need to talk about." Lily immediately rolled her eyes. "Oh great, here we go," she muttered under her breath. I ignored her and continued. "I've been noticing some unusual activity in the business lately. Missing files, altered financial reports, deleted presentations. At first, I thought it was just a series of mistakes, but after looking deeper, I realized there's more to it. Someone's been sabotaging the company." Mom's face went pale, and Dad sat up straighter in his chair. "Sabotage," he repeated. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the stack of papers I'd brought with me. Printouts of the bank statements, the financial discrepancies, the login logs from the office. I placed them on the table in front of me and slid them toward Dad. "I've traced everything back," I said, my voice steady. And all the evidence points to one person. Lily scoffed, crossing her arms. Oh, let me guess. You're going to accuse me of this, aren't you? Because, of course, I'm the villain in your little fantasy world. I looked her dead in the eyes. Yes, Lily, I'm accusing you. For a moment, the room went silent. Mom looked like she was about to cry, and Dad was scanning the papers in front of him, his brow furrowed in confusion. Lily, he asked, his voice strained. Is this true? Have you been stealing from the company? Lily laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh that sent chills down my spine. Stealing? Please. You're both so blind. You've been letting her, she pointed at me, run this company like it's her own personal fiefdom. And now you're surprised that I'm fighting back? What did you expect? Fighting back? Mom whispered, her voice trembling. Lily, you never gave me a chance. Lily snapped, standing up and slamming her hands on the table. You've always treated me like the baby, like the one who couldn't handle anything. And now, you're just handing everything over to her. Your perfect little daughter who's never done a single thing wrong in her life. That's not true, and you know it, I said, my voice rising. I've worked for everything I have, while you've done nothing but leech off this family. Oh, spare me the righteous act, sis, Lily sneered. You've always wanted to push me out. Ever since we were kids, you've been trying to make me look like the irresponsible one, the screw-up. Well, guess what? I'm done playing by your rules. Dad finally spoke, his voice shaking with anger. Lily, this is beyond a sibling rivalry. You've been stealing from the company, our company. Do you have any idea what kind of damage you've done? Lily didn't back down. If anything, she seemed to relish the confrontation. Oh, come on, Dad. It's not like you can't afford it. What's a few thousand here and there? You'd have handed it over to me eventually anyway. A few thousand? I snapped. You've stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, Lily. You're draining the company dry while Dad's recovering from a heart attack. Lily just shrugged, her smirk widening. Maybe if you hadn't cut me out of the business, I wouldn't have had to resort to this. Dad slammed his fist on the table, making all of us jump. Enough, Lily. I don't care what excuses you have. This is theft. Plain and simple. You're not a child anymore. You can't just take what you want and expect no consequences. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross Lily's face. Consequences? She echoed, her voice wavering slightly. Yes, consequences, Dad said, his voice firm. You're out of the company. Effective immediately. You won't have access to any more funds, and you won't be involved in the business at all. As for your share of the inheritance, you can't do this. Lily screamed, her face contorting in rage. I'm your daughter. You can't just cut me out. Lily screamed, her face flushed red, fists clenched by her sides. The shift from entitled indifference to sheer panic happened in an instant, and it was startling. This was the moment where her plan, whatever she thought she was accomplishing by sabotaging me, by draining the company's funds, finally unraveled in front of her eyes. But Dad didn't back down. For once, the usual indulgent fatherly patience wasn't there. His tone was sharp, his expression hardened, and even though he was still weak from his recovery, he looked resolute in a way I hadn't seen in years. We're not going to stand by and let you destroy everything we've built, Dad said, his voice steady, but full of the kind of anger that ran deep. This company, the family's future, it's not just yours to take. You haven't earned that right. Earn? Lily's voice cracked with disbelief. I don't need to earn anything. I'm your daughter. This business is as much mine as it is hers. She pointed at me again, her fingers shaking as she glared in my direction. She just wants to take everything for herself. And you're letting her? No one's taking anything from you, I said, my voice low but firm. You're the one who decided to sabotage me, to sabotage the business. And now you're acting like the victim? You've stolen from your own family, Lily. How do you justify that? Her face contorted, her eyes wild with a mix of fury and desperation. You don't get it, she spat. You've never gotten it. All my life, you've been the perfect daughter, the responsible one, the one who followed all the rules, the one who couldn't make a mistake if she tried. I never stood a chance. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to be different, it was never enough. You always got the praise. You always got to be the favorite. I opened my mouth to argue, but Dad cut me off. This isn't about favorites, Lily, he said, his voice raw, tired. This is about accountability. You think we didn't notice how you drifted away from the family business? You think we didn't care when you chose a different path? We supported you, even when you weren't interested in the company. We've always wanted what was best for you. Mom, who had been quiet throughout most of the confrontation, finally spoke, her voice soft but trembling. Lily, we've always loved you. We've always wanted you to find your own way, and we've given you every opportunity to do that. But this isn't what we taught you. This isn't the person we raised you to be. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker across Lily's face. Regret, maybe, or shame. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by cold defiance. You raised me to be second best, she said bitterly. I was never going to be good enough for you or for this stupid company. So yeah, I took what I thought I deserved. What I deserve. And now you're facing the consequences, Dad said. This is non-negotiable, Lily. You're out of the company, and we're reducing your share of the inheritance. Lily's eyes widened in panic. You can't take that from me. You don't have the right. Dad shook his head. You gave us no choice. We can't trust you anymore. Not after everything you've done. Lily stared at him, her mouth hanging open as if she couldn't comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. She looked at Mom, then back at Dad, searching for some sign of weakness, some indication that they might change their minds. But there was none. This time they were standing firm. Get out, I said quietly, surprising even myself with the coldness in my voice. You've done enough damage. Leave before you make it worse. Lily glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll make you regret this. All of you. And with that, she stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The aftermath of that night was like a dark cloud hanging over the family. For the next few days, Mom was inconsolable, crying at odd moments and blaming herself for everything that had happened. Dad, meanwhile, threw himself back into work, trying to assess just how much damage Lily had done. I helped where I could, but the weight of what had happened was pressing down on me too. Lily was my sister, and no matter how furious I was at her, part of me still wanted to reach out, to fix things. But I knew it was too late for that. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. A week after the confrontation, we began sorting through the financial mess Lily had created. The amount of money she had siphoned off over the months was staggering. Close to $200,000, spread across various personal purchases and gambling debts we hadn't even known about. We also discovered she had been in contact with one of our main competitors, leaking sensitive business information in exchange for personal favors. That was the final nail in the coffin. It wasn't just about the money anymore. Lily had betrayed us in ways I couldn't even wrap my head around. It took months to clean up the financial mess. Between lawyers, forensic accountants, and damage control with our clients, it felt like we were constantly putting out fires. The entire time, I kept waiting for Lily to show up, to apologize, to try to explain herself. But she never did. Instead, we got a call from a lawyer. Lily had decided to sue us. When the legal papers arrived, it felt like a punch in the gut. Lily was suing the family for emotional distress and claiming that she had been unfairly disinherited. The lawsuit was a long shot, and even I could see that she didn't have a leg to stand on legally. But the fact that she had gone so far as to drag our family through the courts, after everything she'd done, felt like the ultimate betrayal. Dad was furious. He immediately hired a top-tier legal team to counter the lawsuit, and the lawyers made quick work of it. Lily's claims were baseless, and the court dismissed the case within a few weeks. But the damage wasn't just in the courtroom. The emotional toll on my parents was immense. Mom, who had always been so strong, seemed to crumble under the weight of it all. The stress of losing one daughter, because that's what it felt like, losing Lily, and the strain of the lawsuit nearly broke her. For me, it was the end of any relationship I had left with Lily. I knew she wasn't coming back from this. She had burned every bridge, cut every tie, and even after the lawsuit failed, she never reached out. She disappeared from our lives, leaving nothing behind but the chaos she had created. Months passed, and we tried to move on. The company slowly recovered, though the financial hit from Lily's theft was significant. We never fully repaired the relationships with some of the clients who had lost trust in us because of her sabotage. I took on more responsibilities in the business, stepping into the role my parents had always intended for me, but it didn't feel like the victory it should have been. It felt hollow, like the cost of getting here had been far too high. I heard through the grapevine that Lily had moved to a different city, living off whatever money she had left. She had burned through most of it. Of course, lavish spending was her hallmark, but she hadn't contacted me. That's it for now. If there are any further updates, I will let you guys know and upload the update of the story in this channel. Till then, subscribe and stay tuned with Reddit Senpai.